What is going on, Scrub fam? We are back. My name is Richard Zapp. Pleasure to talk to you all today. I am here to talk about starter decks. As you know, we have six starter decks that came out with kind of as a precursor to Series 10 here in the last couple weeks. Even though the set 10 itself doesn't actually come out for another 5 to 6 weeks, a lot of people already have these decks in their hand and they're really enthusiastic about playing them. However, a lot of those cards that people are theory crafting right now aren't legal yet until Series 10 comes out. So I wanted to take some time today to talk to you about these three different starter decks and what you can do to improve those decks today. Now, I will say that a lot of these additions are cards that come from the most recent set, that comes from the most recent draft box, and they may not be the most inexpensive to build. We are discussing at the highest competitive level. I can definitely give some suggestions as far as some of those more expensive alternatives, but we'll get right into it. So in case you weren't aware, we have three starter decks that came out. A mono blue deck that focuses on a new Vegito leader, which is super, super cool, as well as the Clan Collusion starter deck, which hits on a new Frieza green Frieza archetype, that has a splash of yellow in it, as well as the Say and Wonder deck, which is a mono black strategy. All three of these decks are relatively playable out of the box, which is really cool to see, but there's definitely opportunity to spruce those up. So let's get into it. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Vegito leader, his niche in this format is being able to awaken very, very early. So while the starter deck doesn't take advantage of this strategy, what a lot of competitive players are doing is they're utilizing blockers on turn 1 or turn 2, sacrificing that blocker, and the unawakened Vegito's ability says during your opponent's turn, one of your blue Unison cards or one of your battle cards removed from the battle area due to an opponent's skill or KO'd, you may flip this card over and draw 2. So effectively, you can awaken at 7-8 life. So we're definitely going to take advantage of that. Unfortunately, without cards like the Zeno Unison and God-Soiling Trunks, going fully into the mono blue strategy doesn't seem like the biggest payoff. So we're going to lean a little bit into blue-yellow here. You see cards such as Beerus Fickle Majesty and Bojack Resin Agent of Destruction, and those cards are really just trying to get you some momentum against other mid-range strategies. A few unique cards you'll see here. We see a couple commons from Draft Box 2. Draft Box 5. We have G. Cole, High Stakes Guardian, as well as Dr. Rhoda, the Unknown Potential. And again, these are both blockers. They allow your Vegito to awaken in the early game if you feel the need to. G. Cole can inconsistently be a one cost blocker with Revenge, which can be huge against finishers. A lot of SCRs can't even, they're actually pretty intimidated by blocker Revenge, which is hilarious. And then Dr. Rhoda has the flexibility of being able to untap one of your blue energy, and that can be multicolor. So being able to open up your God Destroyer Ray, Gene, and Martini, or as well as opening up Flying Nimbus if you're playing against a deck like the new Vegex, or possibly a Green Gohan strategy. Just being able to turn on those yellow negates at any time is relevant. We see the Gogeta Pursuit of Power Unison. The Unison is helpful in protecting your life in the end game. I found that ability is most relevant at the late game, so we lean on cards such as Power of Potara, Dragon Fist, SS3 Goku, as well as the SSB Vegeta Heroic Warrior. And we hope that in tandem, those cards can give you that late game defense and force your opponent to address your big battle card before leaning forward. In the grand scheme of things, there's not a whole bunch of abilities that we're utilizing that with, but we're really trying to take advantage of the leader ability of Pay 2 Blue to give your Unison plus 10k in triple strike. That's really where we're trying to get the value out of Gogeta Pursuit of Power in this deck. A couple other interesting techs. Janimba Infernal Intruder is a cool way to, for 1 energy, apply critical pressure, capitalize on the mid game, as this deck does a fantastic job of doing. Obuni After Image Slash is a very helpful way of applying pressure. It's a great way of savaging opposing Unisons. Swinging with 3 15k tokens is a huge deal. And Bojack, ideally that Bojack would end up being Hit and Goku from the next set, but in the meantime we'll be comfortable comboing our Zamasu Sacred Disbelief or Great Ape Son Goku Saiyan Instincts in order to get that on board and apply pressure. Those blockers again having great synergy with the Vegito leader. Whenever they do pass, you are able to untap an energy and draw a card. So your goal is to constantly be applying relatively large threats and encouraging your opponent to address your threats, so you develop advantage to the leader. And if they don't address those, then you're able to close the game out utilizing your triple strike. Probably the most unique and interesting choice here is the Vegeta Unison Fury as a 2-of. It is worth mentioning that this card cannot gain the triple strike that your Blue Vegito leader does, but there's some pretty impactful combos here as a late game finisher. So imagine having 2 yellow and a blue energy open. You can play this Vegeta Unison Fury for 3 energy, yellow, yellow, blue. Uses his activate main, put one of your battle cards to rest mode, and now he has 4 counters. So you activate the -3, you get to rest one of your opponent's energy, and now you're swinging in with a 20k double strike dual attack. It's a pretty significant interaction, and I think it's something that is useful for closing out sets, as well as if you get lucky with how you open, this can help you against swarmy aggressive strategies. Dragon Ball Negative Energy Overflow is just a tech answer, as this deck doesn't have a lot of great answers to the Jiren archetype, and Dragon Fist SS3 is also a great way of getting rid of those opposing Kuinchi and other Universe 11 cards that are impeding you against the Jiren matchup. Secondly, we have the Frieza starter deck. The Frieza starter deck is not only probably the best built starter deck of the 3 out of the gate, arguably with Vegex. But this deck actually doesn't change a whole bunch from Series 9.9, as I'm calling it, to Series 10. The starter deck does go green into yellow, because Frieza's Call is a really, really synergetic card with the deck, as well as Cold Bloodlust just being a generically amazing card. We'll forego that for Cell's Earth-Shattering Kamehameha. That card just playing so much into the discard strategy that this deck tries to accomplish. So effectively, you're this kind of weird hybrid of a control and a hand destruction deck. The way it works is ideally on turn 1, you play Zarbon, Frieza's right-hand man, and you get whatever card you need from your deck that you don't have. Usually one of those first 2 cards in this deck list. Frieza Zeno, Darkness Overflowing, or Dodoria, Frieza's Devoted Servant. And this deck, Dodoria, is very cool because you're able to synergize very well with the leader ability of sacrificing a Frieza's army to force them to do a discard, and if you're awakened, it's actually a random discard, which is really neat. The Frieza Zeno Darkness Overflow has a +1 ability of choose 1 card in your hand and discard it, and then draw a card. So ideally, you are utilizing Frieza Zeno and Dodoria in tandem, where you're discarding Dodoria, drawing a card, now Dodoria hits the field for free, and then you use that Dodoria, you sacrifice it for your Frieza's army ability. Surprise Attack Frieza is your main way of applying pressure in the mid-game. You have a ton of triggers for it. Not only does your Ribrianne Avatar of Affection wipe the board whenever it hits, but you do have your Frieza Zeno ability. You can -1 to KO anything 4 costs or less, or resolve Fakunsa Beastly Maiden to easily get a pretty impactful board wipe there. Pretty Black Hole is a really cool tech in this deck. Not only does it KO to resolve Surprise Attack Frieza, but I love sacrificing a Surprise Attack Frieza in order to play another copy. And that makes playing 4 copies feel very, very fluent and very decent in the deck. We do play Black Smoke Dragon, as you're able to warp the last 4 cards from your opponent's hand before going lethal with a Frieza combo. That being said, you do play enough 4-cost battle cards that you could try to get greedy and resolve Cell Zeno. I probably wouldn't suggest it. A few other cool options. Hasty Dispatch Dispo is just a cool way to, for 0 energy, make sure that you get a 1-drop Frieza's army on the board. Infernal Emperor Frieza is a way to help you self-awaken. And it's also cool being able to get a 10k body off your Hasty Dispatch Dispo to give you some meaningful swings before you go that route. I do wish you could play the Paragus Super Combo over Android 18 in this deck. However, the leader restriction of not being able to play Saiyans puts you in a difficult situation, where you're going to make do with what you have, but Android 18 is relatively synergetic with the deck, so all things considered, it feels pretty good. You may be surprised to see that Ribrianne Punishing Passion isn't a 4-of in the deck. I think 2 to 3 copies ends up being correct. On honestly, it's you find that you're doing so much with your energy that paying 2 doesn't always necessarily feel the best. A great substitution for Ribrian Punishing Passion is Hidden Power of the Saiyans. This card, as a counterplay, puts your opponent in a catch-22 where they either ruin their summon for the turn, and not to mention that this card does get around Deflect, which is something that very few counterplays do. But you're able to either mitigate their play, or they discard 2, effectively accomplishing the same thing as Ribrian. So if you are in a pinch, I think both of those cards have pros and cons. Hidden Power is a great way of making sure that their late game threat doesn't resolve. Ribrian, Avatar of Affection. This card is just the mother of end games. Being able to swing triple strike after you deplenish their hand is huge, and if it does die, you're able to get Surprise Attack Frieza or Cocoon for additional pressure on the snapback. FDC is a staple anytime that you're playing any significant amount of critical, and with Surprise Attack Frieza being one of the most important cards in the deck, we're going to lean hard into it. Last but not least, 2 copies of Ginyu Frieza Greatest Soldier. I do love this card with Unisons. I love it with leaders that have multiple attacks. The card is just okay in this deck. I'll be transparent with you. Without set 10 cards you have access to, there's a lot of wiggle room in these last 2 to 4 spots. Additional negates, additional 0/5s. I wouldn't increase your 110 count anymore on the combo step. There are a lot of cards here that you can't combo with, but I think this gives you a really solid place to start. And last but not least, Vegex. As long as you haven't been living under a rock, you know that Vegex here is really popular in today's format. A lot of discussions between playing a more aggressive version of the deck versus playing a more defensive and passive version of the deck, and I think both versions have merit to it for sure. This version tries to lean harder into the aggressive strategy, where you don't have access to the starter Trunks Overwhelm card that allows you to do the Splintering Mind combos that people are playing in the aggressive strategies that people like Sandy had popularized. So our aggressive approach instead is we're leaning into a Boo Chain. It's worth noting that because of your leader's ability to naturally mill yourself so quickly, you don't have a demand to run a lot of Majin Buu cards. All you need to do is get 1 copy of your chain pieces. You go down to 2-3 cards in deck, and you're gonna have a copy of Majin Buu, Steadfast Absorption, and your Hybrid Absorption, and your Unparalleled Absorption, and a Supreme Evil, and you're just able to apply 4 or 5 attacks. The way that this deck can function is you can protect your life totals very highly out of the gate, and it gives you a whole bunch of advantage. To make sure that we can resolve that Boo Chain whenever we want, we do play Power Burst to tutor Bobbity, Unrepresented Sorcerer. We also play 1 copy of Malicious Mimicry, so as soon as we mill that, we can just pay 2 energy, and that goes to the discard. While it does feel like you are playing a lot of dead cards in the process, you're really able to mitigate that through the effect of SS Gotenks, Fusion of Friendship. Discarding these dead cards in your hand have always been easy with this deck, and between that and Bobbity, Unrepresented Sorcerer, that trend continues. We do play the SS3 Tag Team VR combo. That combo is still solid. I do play more than 50 cards in this deck because I did find that at 50 cards, whenever you mill, like turn 4 is usually the turn that you want to resolve a Boo Chain, and if you're not able to resolve the Boo Chain, then the deck can peter out sometimes. So you want to make sure when you get to turn 4, you still have plenty of cards left in your deck. So this is a 55 or 56, and I think that's a really solid place to be. Great Ape Son Goku. I know a lot of people are transitioning to the Boo in Series 10 over this card, as well as Fu. I think all of those cards are totally reasonable and totally acceptable in this deck, and if you don't want to play Great Ape, I totally understand, and I don't think you're objectively wrong for it. I do find that on turn 2, being able to draw 2 is the most productive thing I can do with this strategy. But sometimes keeping your hand small so you can resolve a Boo Chain on 3 is a good thing. Hachiyak Hatred Everlasting in tandem with Analyze the Towering Atrocity is the final way that we're closing out games. One of the coolest progressions with this deck, you can be on, I think it's as low as 3 energy. You can get your hand down to 1 card in your hand. Let's say turn 2, you played a Power Burst for free. So what? And you got back Bobbity and represented Sorcerer, and let's say you happen to mill 3 or 4 boos. So you can go defensively, combo out your hand, just have Bobbity in your hand, and so it'll be at like 6 life. You go, you play the Bobbity, you discard a card. You go into the first part of your boot chain, you burst 5, now you're at 20 cards, you awaken, you still have 3 energy, you burst another 5, and then you go Hatred, or Hachiak Hatred Everlasting, you swing with the 25k, and then go and analyze, and you have another 25k double strike right behind that. And those type of attacks are really the most aggressive strategies that we can do with the cards that we have available. Again, if Great Ape Sane Instinct is a limiter for you, I think right now you can do Not Even a Scratch, and you can do Fu Mission Accomplished, which, again, both of those cards, there are times where both of those cards are better. So that is where we're at. 3 starter decks, 3 lists to try to improve the decks. Again, I think all of these decks have a place in the current pre-Series 10 format, and I'd love to hear what you guys are doing. How are you taking advantage of these leaders? Where do you think their application in the format is right now? Leave some feedback in the comments below. Check out the Patreon if you haven't already. If you're still looking for Series 10 product, check out Bearded Collectibles. Alex Pastrana, as my boy always says, the greatest shop owner on the planet. Support your local game store. And if you don't have a local game store, support the beard. Till next time, love you guys. Thanks always for the support. Okay, bye.